Welcome to our roundtable, Ethical, Responsible, and Inclusive Use of Technology. Today's conversation will be in English and in Spanish. We have interpretation available. This roundtable is the outcome of previous conversations between the Council of the Americas and Salesforce on the need to raise awareness on the use of technology and promote its use as an inclusive tool. Salesforce led 5 conversation sessions on this topic with government representatives and journalists from Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and Chile, where they discussed the ethical, responsible, and inclusive use of technology. This regional roundtable is the closing session of their tour. You can find the link to the recording of these conversations on our website. I want to thank Salesforce for their work and commitment to the region and for trusting us to be their partners on this closing session. Technology has taken a leading role in our lives and in the world. For instance, in the last 2 years, it was instrumental in bringing us closer together when we had to isolate ourselves. However, like any tool, it can be used to generate well-being, but it can also have a negative side. In today's conversation, we will seek to raise awareness about some issues. How do we use technology? How do we make it an accessible tool for everyone? How do we close the gap between those who have access and those who are left out? Are we prepared as a society to generate an inclusive use of technology? What should companies do, and what policies should the public sector implement for an intentional, critical, balanced, and informed use of technology? These are some of the questions we will discuss with the panelists and the audience. I want to give a special welcome to today's panelists. Rachel Gillum, Global Head of Policy, Ethical and Humane Use of Tech, Salesforce. Marcelo Cabrol, Chief Scalability, Knowledge and Impact, IDB. And Raúl Echeverría, Executive Director, Asociación Latinoamericana de Internet. I also want to welcome the panelists who were speakers of the Salesforce Regional Tour. We have representatives from Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil joining us today. I look forward to hearing from all of you once we open the floor for conversation. We've divided the conversation into 2 segments. During the first part of the chat, we will talk about ethical and responsible use of technology. I will ask the panelists a few questions and then open the floor to hear everyone's comments and questions. The second part of the conversation will be focused on inclusive use of technology, and we will repeat the format. I encourage everybody to participate actively. We believe the best conversations happen when we hear different voices. I invite you to participate either in English or in Espanol, since everyone connected has access to simultaneous interpretation. We ask that you please keep your lines on mute to minimize any background noise. If you want to participate once we open the floor to the audience, please raise your digital hand and I will call on you. The discussion will end at 2:30 Eastern Time, and we ask that you be mindful of time by keeping your questions and comments short. I look forward to listening to the debate and hearing your ideas. And as Alejandro Anderlich always says, let's come away from this conversation with some concrete deliverables, things that we could each use in our daily lives to make sure that we're thinking about ethics and we're also thinking about inclusion. As a reminder, this program is on the record. We will record it and it will be available to everybody on our website in a few days. And with that, I will start the conversation by asking Rachel the first questions. Rachel, one of the main concerns around technology is the misuse of personal information. How can companies better protect consumers' right to privacy?
Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, really happy to be here. It's such an important question around privacy. And I just want to start by saying, those who aren't familiar with our office, I'm with the Salesforce's Office of Ethical and Humane Use, and our office was founded back in 2018 because Mark Benioff decided we needed a central office to really address questions and concerns like privacy and data privacy. And so we have various strategies by which my office focuses on building in things like privacy from the very beginning of our product development, as well as empowering our end users to best deploy our technologies responsibly. So there's many ways that we do it at Salesforce, and we're continuing to look for more ways to advance this. But just a few examples. First, again, building privacy guardrails in from the very beginning. So one example is during the pandemic when we created a product called Safety Cloud, which was aiming to help everyone get back together in person safely. We knew that, we're dealing with sensitive personal information, personal health data, and that we needed to partner closely, our team, with our product teams, legal teams, privacy teams, to ensure that we embedded guardrails in our collection and use of this data. So the examples include making only the most necessary data fields required when collecting information, providing guidance on how to separate access to sensitive information for our users, as well as gather meaningful consent of that data for users. So those are those type of examples. And as I mentioned, we also provide guidance for our customers as well. And so for another example is our marketing products. We seek to embed those privacy guardrails there as well, but we also created trusted marketing principles. So this is guidance for our users and how they use our tools. So some of these principles include things like use and collect individual information appropriately, be transparent about how the data is used. Remember that your consumers want control and clarity as well as how their data is used, and make sure you're providing clear benefits in exchange for that data. So that's just a couple examples of how we try to do that work. Again, privacy really being a key pillar of our office.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Guidelines and guardrails. I love those. Raul, how about from your standpoint at Ally, what can companies do to better protect consumers' rights to privacy?
Yes. Thank you, Randy. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I was happy to share with those distinguished colleagues in this panel. The companies, the internet companies, usually it's work intensively in improving the respect to privacy and the protection of personal data within the platforms. This is very important for the companies because, as contrary to what many people think, the main asset of the internet platforms is the trust of their users. So it's important to work to increase that trust. And today, I saw in the network an announcement of one of the biggest tech companies saying that they are improving their products to minimize the use of personal data and to use only the personal data that the users allow the platforms to manage in order to provide the targeted advertising and those things. So this is the challenge. The challenge is to improve the products to get the same results, minimizing, reducing the use of personal data, and respecting, of course, the rights of the user to select what are the data that they are able to share. Certainty is very important for the company. So it's good, and we work all the time with the local authorities to have robust and also good sound policies and data protection that allow to protect the rights of the users at the same time that we offer an enabling environment for digital development. So we cooperate with in Latin America with the Ibero-American network of data protection authorities. That is one of the main players in this area. And just for finish my interventions, there are two gaps, I think. One gap is a gap of expectations. Of course, there will be always people that will have different expectations about privacy and data protection. But it's important that we work together in order to maximize the opportunity of building consensus and approaching the different views on the point. And the other gap is a gap about information. Many people don't know how the data is managed by the internet companies, and it's important that they know better how the rights are respected and protected. And this is something that we have to work daily on, how we provide better information to the users so they know how the information is managed. So the information gap is something that we can close and we can work to reduce. And the gap of expectations is something that we have to work together to reduce that gap, but there will be probably always different expectations and different point of view about the matter.
Thank you, Raul. I like the idea that trust is the main asset. It's so hard to win it back once you've lost it. Moving on to the second question, another ethical concern surrounding technology is the dissemination of misinformation. Whose responsibility is it to review and fact-check content online? Rachel, first question for you, and then we'll ask Marcelo. Rachel.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it's an important question. I know it's one being hotly debated. Given Salesforce products, we don't really deal with content moderation in the same way like a social media platform would have to today. But with that said, I'll say that my team, our government affairs team, we're really invested in working together with policymakers to understand and safeguard the use of different advanced technologies. We think it's really important to engage in these type of collaborations and public-private partnerships, because we believe that the government and private sector should be working together to, collaborate on approaches to ensure that individuals are protected from unintentional harm, and ensuring that, innovation can, continue, again, while protecting those key, against those key harms. So that's what I'll add to that. And just to say, again, we're really focused on making sure we are doing our part to engage. I, for example, am part of our U.S. Chamber of Commerce's AI Commission, for example, where we're bringing together government, industry, and civil society leaders to address some of these ethical use challenges head on and coming together as a group to find those right approaches. And different members of my office are also on different advisory councils, again, working together with governments. Our lead AI ethicist, Kathy Baxter, advises Singaporean government. Our chief ethical use officer, Paula Goldman, advises the United States National AI Advisory Committee. So those are examples, again, that are more relevant for our products. But all to say that we really think collaboration is important in a lot of these emerging spaces.
Collaboration is certainly important. Marcelo, over to you. Whose responsibility is it to review and fact-check content online? This is really your sweet spot.
Thank you very much, Randy. As Rachel was saying, this collaboration needs to take place in this area. But I would put the onus here, and I'm going to be on as Rachel was saying, on the primary effort that the companies should do. That doesn't mean that the companies should work alone. They should work with not only governments, because that's the first place we go, but also with civil society in putting together the mechanisms that you need in order to fact check and do. Now, the difficult question here, when you ask me this, is what is that we are fact checking? What that we are checking on this? And I think that there's an evolving conversation in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we are seeing in many countries now, in which, by the way, the private sector is taking the lead in this conversation, and governments are following. In what do we mean by protecting consumers? And you asked about privacy before, and I think that it's interesting because the arc now of the conversation goes from simply issues of fairness of use, monitoring and surveillance, and now privacy becomes, for example, issues of big data, data manipulation, and behavior manipulation. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's everybody's responsibilities. The private sector has an important role to play, but we need to be careful because this is a moving conversation in terms of what definitions we take on, data protection, privacy, and cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence, and ethical use of data, which is personal. So I think that that's something that we need to take into consideration.
Mighty big topics. education is very important.
Yes.
That's how we're going to prepare the future generations. And just recently, I was listening to a podcast where CEO of a big technology company said that this is one area that technology can do a lot more with. How can schools teach better, responsible use of technology? And how can the public and private sectors collaborate on this front? And Marcelo, I'll start with you, and then I'll ask for comments from Rachel and Raul.
That's a great question. If you look closely, the only country that is way ahead on acquisition of these kind of tools for schools is Estonia. So let's look at Estonia for a moment, okay? So you go with issues of media literacy that goes from K to 12. You use the curriculum that you have not as a special assignment, but media literacy should be embedded in all the curriculum. For example, in 3rd grade in Estonia, you learn about statistics, basics, okay? But you start thinking about manipulation statistics as a way of nudging behavior. And you do that in the 3rd grade, and then you get to a 10th grade, and on the 10th grade, you have a dedicated subject that deals essentially with how art can be used to manipulate information, how math can be used as manipulating information, and that's a mandatory subject now. Of course, you learn there issues of bots, trolls. I'm trying to remember how social media works. I mean, they try to teach you along the way those kind of tools, and those tools are totally natural. And you know what? This conversation came because of the issue of cybersecurity. Estonia has, as you know, a very advanced digital state, and they were being attacked all the time. Wow. But then they detected that manipulation was going on, and they immediately moved. And this is from 2010. This is not a new development. There's very few countries that have actually followed this lead, and I think that that's important.
I'm speechless. Rachel, comments on education and how public and private sectors can collaborate on this front.
Yeah, I would echo some of what Marcelo just mentioned. It's so important just to have some fundamental understanding of how some of this technology works at a very early stage, and those critical thinking, critical reading skills as well. But I'll say one thing that encourages me that at least at the university level, I am starting to see a lot more courses and areas of specialty specifically on tech ethics. And that's really encouraging, as well as ethics being required increasingly in business schools, in computer science programs. So I think that's the right direction. There's still more to go, but that should be really a standard part of, again, those entering business and computer science and beyond. I'll say for Salesforce, we try to partner in ways that we can. For example, my office hosts interns, for example, and that's a great way for students to get some exposure to this type of work, because it is an emerging field. It is fairly uncommon still, but we see a growing number of ethical use offices like ours. So it's great to really have that engagement with students in that way. And then also, we recently, for example, sponsored a cohort of Salesforce employees to attend a Stanford Tech Ethics course. So we, our folks from our team in the broader company engaging with Stanford students in tech ethics classes and having our team lead some discussions. And that was a great way for us to engage with students and to have that sort of industry student conversation. And then finally, also trying to do our part, we do have an online learning platform, Trailhead. And this is a great tool to help create, pathways for people to succeed in the new economy, provide free training and reskilling. So that's another way to sort of help, engage the public, offer those type of services, because I think a lot of concern around emerging technologies is how, those people need those skill sets to take advantage of the new jobs that are coming out of this tech, these changes. So I'll just add that from the Salesforce perspective.
And Rachel, here's some free advertising for Salesforce. We're now adopting a platform that runs on Salesforce, and we're all learning Trailhead. So,
great.
We're really excited about that. I'm a difficult taskmaster when it comes to time. So Raul, can you add to this conversation? But you have a minute, and then we're going to Enrique Cortes and opening the floor for questions and comments in an active debate.
Good. I think that as it used to be in the past and will continue being in the future, parents have a huge responsibility on how children use the technology, and that will continue being in that way. Parents have to understand that they cannot just drop the hands of the children and justify themselves saying they use the technology better than us. We cannot teach them anything. We can teach them everything. So and we don't have to give up from that mission to go with them, to walk together with them in this sense. With regard to the schools, there are two things that can be done. One is I endorse Marcelo's comments on the responsible use of technology and teach them the how to differentiate that, but also to introduce a natural use of technology. My country, Uruguay, has developed a very successful program using technology in the schools, and this is very good because the kids have a very natural approach to technology. So they know that technology can be used for good, and so this is not they don't learn on the street how to use the technology. They learn through the formal system. A very last comment on this is about fake news specifically. The humankind need to find new sources of legitimacy. Technology will put that more difficult in the future to differentiate what is true and what is not true. And so the school is very important for that, for promoting critical thinking, as Rachel said, and endorse together with what Marcelo said before about how to teach the responsible use of technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. And we have our first comment from Enrique Cortes from El Tec de Monterrey. Enrique.
Hello, just an experience I want to share. We believe as an institution that teaching kids the ethical side of the digital world is very important. So we took some materials from MIT Media Lab that they already had developed for the US. We translated them to Spanish, and then we tropicalized them. And then we use an open source tool from Google. And we designed a class to teach the principles of AI from an ethical point of view to kids from 7th grade to 9th grade. And what I can share is that experience is fantastic because those kids, for them, is very natural. Actually, when we discuss ethical topics, we teach them the principles of deep learning and how to train neural nets and all that. And then we talk about the ethics and the bias of data. For them, it's very normal to say, of course, that's how you need to do it. For them, it's no surprise that technology has to be ethical. So we have that experience. If somebody wants to know more, I'm here. And then we design a set of videos. It's not a taping of the class. It's something very entertaining that we are offering to the state of Jalisco to put in their digital platforms. So if somebody's interested, I'm your contact.
Did you plan this? Because the next hand up is Francisco Medina from the state of Jalisco. Francisco, over to you.
No, I don't think it was planned. It was just a coincidence. Well, I mean, I come from the state government, and I really don't agree with what they just said, that the private sector is taking the lead. I don't think that's happening, at least here in Latin America. And both regarding cybercrime and regarding customer service, it's not true. I mean, I do believe that there's no way industry will self-regulate. I mean, they talk about self-regulation, but they don't do it. It's just, you know, a sort of a way of justifying themselves. And I think that there's a strong regulation needed, and that means fines. Fines inflict pain, and it's the only way to make industry react. For example, take into account cybercrime. BBVA, which is very well known and has a strong presence all over Latin America, it's a top offender in cybercrime here in Mexico. And they don't give a damn. They are cynical about it. They patronize clients, and they always return the issue to the customer. They never take anything seriously. And that's just an example. And so, and twice today in the morning, I heard the same statement saying that because they have a CRM, then they have us covered. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, they sometimes they forget that systems are programmed by people and people fail. And so they say, okay, if something fails, it is the system. No, if something fails, it is the attitude and the lack of ethics in terms of customer service and customer attention. So I don't agree with what's been said. I mean, I have nothing against Salesforce. I don't even know Salesforce, but I am surprised that, no, it's like a self-indulgence. Say, oh, okay, things are working okay and everything is fine and we're doing a lot. That's not true. At least in Mexico, it's not true. I've had 6 identity thefts in 5 years.
Oh my.
And I think it's because of BBVA. That's my suspicion, because it's become a pattern and nobody cares. Thank you.
Now we really know how you feel. And Francisco, I think that if we all thought everything was perfect, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. And that's why we're having the conversation,
Okay.
so that we can hear the things that have to be fixed and also the things that are working well. I mean, Estonia. Frank Okeki, we are thrilled that you're joining us today. We've heard so much about you. Over to you.
Thank you. Just 2 comments. The first one is that it's an obviousness that the mobile, the cellular phone has become the best leveler for internet access and technology access. I think that's something that should not be left aside, and we really confirm this by in 2 cases together with Salesforce. One was working in educating in very vulnerable areas. The mobile access and the Trailblazer platform of Salesforce was of the essence for that, and that gave very good access to everybody. And the second one is a program that we have started also educating in Salesforce to Ukrainian women in Poland, where we thought that internet access and technology access would be a problem and a logistic that we would have to solve. 100% of the people that registered had, because of the mobile phone, had access to these courses. So I think that when we speak about the ethical use of technology, access is one of the most important things. And second, just hearing the comments of the previous speakers, I think that regarding big data and artificial intelligence, there is a challenge on how we feed these engines, because the same bias that we have in the real world will be translated in the digital world if we don't care how we feed these engines. So those are my 2 suggestions and comments to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. And the next comment comes from Angel. Angel.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for the invitation. And sorry for being 10 minutes late, exactly to miss Marcelo's, my good Marcelo friend. But we tend to agree, so I'm pretty sure I endorse his words. No, but I was afraid to be like the economist calling for regulation and being criticized as Ronald Reagan said. I mean, all the economists and all the states, what they do is when something moves, they regulated it. If it keeps on moving, they tax it. And if it stops moving, they subsidize it. No, I hope I'm not this kind of person. Let me say that I'm using my UNESCO hat right now. I'm regional advisor of UNESCO on ethics and artificial intelligence. And we are absolutely bullish with artificial intelligence. I mean, the way that artificial intelligence can boost how people get jobs is amazing. How it can optimize how we access credit or buy some insurance, or how it can improve public policies, taxes, targeted benefits. It has no range, and actually it's totally needed for a region that has been hit so hard by COVID. But there are risks, and we feel that we need some regulation, no? Because I mean, to be frank, right now humans all of us, I think all of us, maybe there are no humans in this seminar, but humans, we are not, yeah, you never know, Randy.
Avatars aren't here yet, Angel, sorry.
But it would be good. It would be good. But because the reality out there is that most of the information right now is exchanged among machines. So we are not seeing it. Most of the data that is already degenerating between conversations among our machines, our telephones, our refrigerators, our cars, and not ourselves. And also the artificial intelligence systems are clever enough to be defining some of the rules of these conversations. So we need to put the humans back in the center of this artificial intelligence. And I have heard, and we have heard from companies, excuses sometimes. Complexity. It's too complex. You know, you cannot regulate it because it's too complex. Well, that's an excuse. And two, all regulation is bad. Let us regulate ourselves. Well, we have seen the risk of non-regulation in some of the big developments in AI, and from UNESCO, what we think that we have to be proactive. We cannot wait until seeing the impacts of our artificial intelligence systems and say, I'm sorry, I finally intervened in your election. I didn't expect that, but it happened. Or I'm sorry, we thought we were optimizing your tax system, but you know, we made mistakes and suddenly we took out social benefits from families that they needed. Two real examples. These are two real examples. I'm not going to be naming names. But why do we have to be proactive? Because we know that many companies are in effect, and that's when I'm going to be disagreeing with our previous speaker, there are many companies that are actually putting these questions beforehand. So before developing a system of artificial intelligence, you have to ask yourself, is my data representative enough, or are there lacks in the data? Number two, are we training well the models to distinguish cause from correlation? Three, are we identifying the biases that we might be reproducing or even amplifying, and what are we doing? And four, even more basic, is the team developing the AI systems diverse enough? Women, age, race, whatever. So this is UNESCO recommendations, as far or as limited as you want it, but we think that we have to be proactive, because if not, it's true, we will be getting very, very bad regulation down the road, because our societies are going to be feeling the pain of some of these unintended mistakes, because, oops, we didn't foresee that effect, and finally our systems amplified some of the problems that we have. But I am optimistic.
I'm glad that you're optimistic, Angel. It's always good to hear from you. Before we go to Diego, Rachel, Raul, or Marcelo, any reactions to what we've heard thus far? Raul, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. It's very hard to react to. Yes, very hard to react quickly to Angel. He spoke a lot and he introduced a complete, a huge issue that is the artificial intelligence. So I can just make an opinion about regulation in general. And no, but I don't think that's anybody in the private sector is claiming for no regulation at all, and that self-regulation can solve everything. This is not true. And I represent an organization that is representative of the digital private sector in Latin America, and we don't propose that. And in fact, there are already hundreds of regulations for digital companies in the region. At some point, we have to be careful, because at some point, so it's a matter of the flavor, where is the regulation stop being a sound regulation and start being an over-regulation. In Latin America, we have to develop our own approach, and our own approach have two big objectives: is protect the right of the people, and it's offer to provide a good environment for development. Development is one of our main objectives. Other regions have other different set of objectives. Other regions are just taking care only about the rights, but without including the dimension of development. In Latin America, we need to provide the good environments for development. So we have to be very careful with that. we are plenty of examples in Latin America about unintended consequences of regulation. So it's, and I understand what Angel said about and to anticipate the problems and to regulate on early stages of development, but also there are many risks related with the regulations and those early stages of development. So regulation is okay. We are very open to discuss regulation. We have to be very careful about unintended consequences. We have to provide good avenues for development, and the key for developing that those sound regulation is the participation of all stakeholders in the debate: civil society, private sector, governments, everybody on the table. Thank you.
Rachel or Marcelo, a comment before we go to Diego?
Yeah, there was a lot to respond to. I'll just make 2 quick points, and just as Raul said, for us, we do support common sense regulations of technology, including things like AI. And again, that's exactly why our office works closely with our government affairs and legal teams to make sure we're working with policymakers to understand how to best safeguard the use of AI. To another point, separately on the responsibility of the company in the AI development, I couldn't agree more. It starts from the very beginning. We have a whole ethical AI team that we work with, making sure, again, we're looking at the data going into our systems, that we're providing transparency by publishing details about that data and the models, and sort of using those best practices, and then going a little bit farther by, again, establishing and publishing and sharing some of these AI principles to help other companies that don't have the same resources really think about the design and deployment of their AI technology. And we go beyond that, and then also, again, build in some of those tools within the AI to help the end users, right, who can take the AI and use it in different ways, be aware of sort of some of the choices that they're making. So happy to talk more about that, but a lot of great points made.
So now we're going to Diego, and then we'll give Marcelo an opportunity to respond. Diego, over to you.
Thank you very much, Randy. I'm Diego. I lead the government affairs team for IBM in the Andean countries out of Bogota in Colombia. I just wanted to take a moment to comment on a couple of things that have been said, and also to take a minute to really reflect on how valuable these forums are, and I really applaud you for organizing it, and thank you for inviting us. When we speak about technology, we've usually thought about it in a utilitarian sense, and we've judged it on that normative ethics approach. Does this facilitate my life? Does this technology help me get from point A to point B faster? Does it help me get my work done? We now know that technology must be judged not only on that utilitarian basis. We know now that technology doesn't only facilitate human interaction, but also shapes human interaction, right? So when there's a technological development, it can really have an impact on social interactions, on power structures, for sure. So, there certainly have been unintended consequences of regulation, but there have been, I believe, maybe even bigger unintended consequences of technology, right? That's why it's so important that we have these spaces. We now have forums like this where we discuss this, but there's one intellectual, one writer who has been thinking about these issues way before anyone, as far as I'm concerned. His name is Langdon Winner. If any of you have read his book, The Whale and the Reactor, it's amazing, how he asks the questions: do artifacts have politics? He wrote this back in the 80s, right? Even before we had social media and before we had all of these new technological developments. He was asking the question, how technology really shapes our lives. And one thing that he says in his book that really struck me is, through technological developments, we are constantly signing new social contracts whose terms we really don't understand and are only revealed to us after the fact. Right, so that's why it's so important to anticipate those quote unintended consequences of technology, because they really shape human life. As far as anticipating it, I know that all of our companies are trying to do at least some good work on this. For Francisco, who was complaining about theft identity, as an IBM representative, I would suggest that the people you work with look into IBM's cybersecurity systems, IBM is probably one of the few, if not the only company in big tech that has never been subject to a malicious hack. We've also worked on AI ethics. There's the Rome call for AI ethics. If I invite you to look into that, the 2020 call for ethical AI signed by Microsoft, IBM, other companies, I believe, and the Vatican as well. Angel, who just spoke, has been doing great work on this also from the UNESCO side. The ethical AI is something that really we should think about, in terms of transparency, inclusion, responsibility, impartiality in the sense of it not being biased. So yes, I mean, parents, teachers, we're all involved, but also the technology makers, right? Us, our companies, we have some responsibility. I agree with Angel in that, it's not valid to say, we'll just regulate ourselves. We need regulation. And we've already seen how, governments have been increasingly, I believe, open to, receiving new ideas. Senators, for any one of us who's been in the public policy world, we know that policymakers are not necessarily experts on these matters, and we need to get the message across to them. So just to end, I guess that my final message would be, thank you so much for organizing these spaces, and let's all work together to get the word out, right? So that, these recommendations that come out of UNESCO that Angel has worked on, or the Rome call for AI ethics, that they don't only stay within our, very small niche of tech workers, but that we can get them to policymakers, to the people, so that they can really understand. Colombia, where I live, is a great example of this. The government has set up a task force of experts on AI that will recommend policies for this, right? So it's really important to not only stay within these spaces that are super valuable, but also to get the word out. And really thank you for helping us think about technology and the social change and the political change that is associated with it. So I guess I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Diego. And it's always heartening that people are really happy and engaged and want to take away something very, very useful from these conversations. So muchas gracias. As I said in the beginning, you can also speak Spanish. We have interpretation. Marcelo, ¿cómo reaccionarías? And you can speak English.
A couple of things. I think that if we follow what's going on in Europe and the US in terms of regulation and government versus private, or government and private, we need to learn from Latin America that things can be different. So I think that that's I guess my first point. We also need to differentiate between, private companies that are trying to do good things, learning from what they learn in the US and in Europe, and bring the conversation to Latin America. So we need to differentiate those that are doing good things and those that are not doing good things. And that's not difficult, okay? And a third point that I want to put on the table is that there's, of course, big companies, big technology companies are way ahead in terms not only of technology, but also the talent working on that. Those companies that are willing to be good corporate citizens, good digital citizens, and try to work with the government to regulate, not to self-regulate, but to balance the level of regulation and to do regulations that are intelligent, needs to be rewarded. And so at the IDB, what we're trying to do essentially is we're trying to find, working with governments, the soft spot for them to actually develop intelligent regulations. And what we are seeing that big companies are learning from other places is that they need to be good corporate citizens in order to put together something that is different. We understand that we are not Europe. We cannot do full GDPR and solve the problem. We cannot do simply the market would rule, or mostly the market would rule, as the US is doing, or coming far behind in terms of government regulation. So I want to put those three topics on the table, because otherwise we are talking about reproducing debates that took place elsewhere and that are not solved.
Big question. Rachel, do you want to react to that before we move on to the second part of the roundtable?
No, I think that was several great points. And just to say, yeah, I think it's so important for, again, intelligent regulation, really looking at the differences between these technologies, these companies is critical to not, have sort of blanket rules that might really stifle that innovation and the benefits that technology can bring. So no, just to say +1 to those comments.
Thank you so much. So now we're moving from artificial intelligence and ethics and regulation to inclusion, because a lot of people that we want to bring into the world of digitalization and the digital economy wouldn't understand the conversation that we have been having. And so a big challenge in advancing technology has been ensuring that's available for all. And to this day, research indicates that the technology is actually widening social disparities. What can we all do to mitigate this? And how do we make technology more accessible to all? Marcelo, I'm going to start with you again, because that's your sweet spot.
No problem. Since we were talking about big technology companies, I think that there is something very interesting about that. I'm gonna make the overall statement. The overall statement is, when we think about technology at the IDB, we always have the debate. I think that everybody does, actually, whether we should work with poor and vulnerable populations, thinking of technology as something that would solve the problem, and whether that's naive or not. Well, let me be categorical here. We think that we need to do it. We have no choice. Okay, we cannot scale up. We cannot take digital goods to the masses if we don't think about new ways of doing that. So one of the things that are important here, in my view, Randy, is that technology companies work to develop ecosystems of other companies, smaller companies that will actually work on solutions that are to not the mainstream of the consumers or the consumer base that big companies have. They integrate it into their business model and they promote their capacities. And this is important because we cannot put on those that manage big technologies the onus on implementation of these kind of solutions. Now, these companies, the small ones, will become eventually competitive, and we're going to have a competitive market on the technology side that will be inclusive in terms of the other way around. This seems to be simplistic, but again, I'm seeing some companies on the private sector. I think that the people here of the Be Kind Fund, Globant, are joining the conversation. Well, this is one example of how we can actually think of big companies thinking about the important issues of inclusion in technology. So we think that it's important. We at the IDB Lab are working all the time on trying to bring these technologies to the level of poor and vulnerable. And by the way, by poor and vulnerable, I'm talking, of course, about gender issues, but also diversity issues and geographical differences, because we are thinking always that when we talk about Brazil and innovation and technology, or Argentina or Mexico, we forget sometimes that we also have Honduras, or we need to take care of, the Amazonas in Ecuador. I think that there's something that to be thought more profoundly. Thank you.
Or the Sierra in Peru.
Or the Sierra in Peru.
Rachel, how do we make technology more accessible to all?
Yeah, just want to echo some of the things that were said, but also just to say, yeah, it's so important. Again, a key focus of our office is thinking about accessibility. We actually last year added our product accessibility team and inclusive design into our office. And so in addition to thinking about, again, ethical issues, protection, privacy, we are thinking about accessibility and being inclusive as we build our products, again, from the very beginning. So I mentioned another example of a product that, we've really tried to think through these type of questions from the beginning. We had a product called Vaccine Cloud, which was a product for facilitating the scheduling of vaccine appointments and other vaccine related work for a lot of government customers and things like that. And so in partnership, my team with the product team, we created principles for ethical vaccine management to help build in those guardrails, again, focus on privacy, but also accessibility and inclusion. So one example for, accessibility, we wanted to make sure that, not everyone has a smartphone. So we want to make sure we're including ways to integrate into the product where folks could sign up, using a phone, for example, and also looked for other ways to make sure that individuals with disabilities could also access the product as well. We also made sure it was available in multiple languages, for example. There was other design features, again, that were brought in from the beginning as we were thinking about, again, some of the unintended consequences of design features. We made sure to, not require certain data collection, such as permanent addresses, because something like that could unintentionally exclude people who are unhoused, for example. So it's those type of questions that, again, our team is working through from the very beginning to really tease out what are the ways we can make this as inclusive and accessible as possible. And then to the point about, again, sharing this and helping other smaller companies, do the same. We, again, published a lot of our work. So we published, we create a build with intention workshop and published materials around that to help other companies, walk through these sort of, processes as they're developing their products, to think through how to account for different diverse groups and stakeholders as they're building their products.
It's great to get in early to help people bring in technology as they're creating products. And so how can all sectors of society, public sector, private sector, academia, and civil society all work together to make sure that tech is used as a force for good and as a benefactor for all, while ensuring that marginalized populations are being actively included in the discussion? Rachel, you go first, and then Raul.
Yeah, it's so important. And, I mentioned a lot just now, I'll just add that, quality is a core value at Salesforce, and we are committed to creating a workplace that really reflects the diverse communities around us, where everyone feels seen and heard and empowered. And I think that's key in recruiting and retaining diverse, and a diverse employee base, because I think that's super important as we're developing this technology, that the folks developing it represent society. And so that's a big focus of ours, is making sure, we are doing that thoughtfully. So we've actually created a specific diversity recruiting center. This is not on my team, but it's within the company. We have inclusive hiring training that's required for all managers and recruiters. So that's one thing, is, again, making sure we have diverse people actually building the product and thinking through those consequences. And then additionally, my office does have an ethical use advisory council. So that's made up of a diverse set of what we call frontline employees, key executives across the company, but also external experts representing different regions around the world, different expertise, to make sure we are really listening and, again, challenging our thinking, making sure we're considering those different stakeholders and people who could be impacted by the technology.
Thank you, Rachel. We had a program recently on benefits and learned that most of the benefits were always designed by white men. So they didn't know what sort of benefits were important to women, and that's changing also. Raul, what would you add to this conversation?
First of all, I would like to endorse what you said right now, and this is very important. Your question have different parts. Let me focus on some of them. The Latin America faces at this moment a very big challenge, or two big challenges. One is to speed the economic recovery and economic development growing, and the other one is to find more inclusive development models. There are a lot of tensions, that social tensions, that we have to find solutions to deal with them. And digital development is central to advance the two objectives. There is a digital development is not optional now. There is no chances to human, social, or economic development without digital development. And we can use technology for reduce the gaps, different gaps, gender gaps, but also geographical gaps and other kind of gaps. The one example we see that the SMEs that are participating in digital economy. Yesterday, in a meeting we organized together with the Inter-American Development Bank, one marketplace very famous in the region shared with us that 1 million SMEs are trading in their platform. but we have around 14 SMEs in Latin America. So the work to do is still huge. And when we see other researchers, we see that the 80% of the SMEs that are participating through digital tools in the economy are based in the main cities in the region. So there is still a lot of work to do together with the governments in local governments and national governments to bring on board all those SMEs that are located based in the countryside or far from the main metropolis. This is something that nobody can do by themselves. We have to work together in building capacities, promoting technology, but also helping us creating the avenues and to allow those SMEs to participate in the digital development. There is, of course, another issue that we have to spend some time, and we have presented some recommendations to the summit, to the America Summit, on connectivity, because that's the basic requirement. If we don't connect the people, so they cannot participate in the digital the development. And just one sentence about this is that yes, the concept we promote is that there is innovation from the point of view of technology, policy, and regulation. There is no one single technology that can help to connect everybody. We have to be smart, intelligent in combining all the tools that we have available in the best way to connect all the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. And now we go to our last question, which is my favorite question, which is that research shows that diverse teams are more successful, innovative, and productive. What initiatives can tech companies put in place to foster diversity and inclusion? Fran, I know that your hand is raised, but we haven't heard from any women in this conversation. So I will ask you to raise your hands. Otherwise, I'm going to call on you. So Rachel, what can we do specifically?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think one a lot of companies are thinking a lot about. I mentioned a few already that Salesforce is engaged in, again, creating a dedicated recruiting team focused on diversity and identifying diverse candidates. Inclusive hiring training, again, for all hiring managers as we're thinking, interviewing folks and really thinking about those questions, as well as training for managers as well to keep an inclusive environment and really know how to support diverse and a diverse employee base. And I would just end with just saying that, again, it takes some intentionality, frankly, for folks to seek out diverse perspectives. And that could slow down processes to some degree, but it's so important. And we believe that it causes us to really innovate and create better products, frankly, when we're really forced to, again, think about these questions from different angles.
We were once at a Women's Hemispheric Network program in Mexico. I'll make it really quick. And this one woman who worked at an energy company who's very aggressive, very dynamic, very loud. She said she would sit there at these meetings with her colleagues and they would never call on her. So one day she just raised her leg and the room was silent. And from then on, she spoke. Raul, what would you suggest other than raising your leg?
But very, I can't. Very briefly, I think that Rachel has shared with us a lot of good practices that from the industry. As many companies in this sector have similar or the same kind of objectives and policies, internal policies. And of course, the diversity is a huge objective. We as ALAI are this year started an award to recognize the role of women in digital economy in the region. But this is not something that it depends only on us. When we see, if you go to the United Nations headquarters and you see on the main hall the pictures of all the Secretary General, they are all men. And so we have a lot of work to do. There is very few women that have been presidents in the countries in Latin America. So I think that this sector is working hard to change the world from our perspective. The work is a lot, and of course we expect to have some results. The commitment is very big.
They're great organizations like Chicastic, for instance. Marcelo,
Yes.
from the IDB standpoint, you have a lot of women in your senior management ranks. What can companies do to emulate that?
We do, and I think that the first thing is, of course, as Rachel and Raul said, is intentionality. You need to have goals. I think that's an old, idea, but it's one that works very well. The second one, I think, is to create the proper networks for women and diverse populations to actually thrive. The issue of recruitment has been an achievement for us. We are still working, and we're going to continue to work in retaining and promoting. We are doing pretty well now in terms of promoting, but I think that there's more to be done. And the last point is to understand diversity in all its aspects. The issues of gender have been very much into our priorities, but we need to start working mostly on bringing also indigenous population or representation for indigenous population, Afro-descendants, people with disabilities into the fore, both in the private sector and the public sector in Latin America. We're still falling behind in terms of integrating that. And I think that there is a clear return from that. We are being more productive and we are being more efficient now because we have a much more diverse management team that we used to have. So we need to plow forward.
One thing that's great when you go to Mexico City is that they have people in wheelchairs that are actually checking your ticket before you go through security, which is wonderful. And now we're going to open the floor for questions and comments. And I see one hand. Fran, over to you. And then I would like some women to raise their hands. Fran.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Randy, and thank you for the invitation to this roundtable. Last time you invited me, the purpose of the roundtable was talent generation in IT, and I think that that same challenge, that lack of talent, that lack of resources, IT. I remember that time we have 80 open positions and we're about 150 people. Now we're 250 and we are still with 80 open positions. And what happened to us is the same to happen to the industry. So this challenge is also the opportunity for inclusion. That was why I was telling you what we are doing to train people and to, if you have to train them, take the advantage and look for, women, indigenous people, gender minorities, put objectives and train them, because I think that's shooting two birds with the same bullet. So that's why I wanted to add to this conversation. Thank you again for the invitation.
One of the most memorable factoids that I've learned in the past, I guess it's 5 years, we were at a program in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and somebody got up on stage and said that there were 40,000 positions in technology that went unfilled in Brazil each year because there weren't qualified people. And then we had a program a few years later on skilling and developing jobs, and we must have had 20 companies at the roundtable. There were 2 Brazilian companies, everybody else was a US multinational. So that says something, but I think they're catching up. So I don't see any women's hands raised, so I'm going to call on one. Carolina, you had a comment before. Would you like to say something, please? I'm sure you have something valuable to add.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this. This has been really exciting. I just wanted to share what Marcelo said. I'm part of Globant's initiative. We've just launched a new category of investment fund. It's called the Be Kind Tech Fund. And we specifically support startups mitigating the negative effects of technology in currently 1 of 5 categories, but these categories are going to expand over time. We recently partnered with IDB Lab and the Center for Humane Technology. And together we're going to see how we can ensure that we always have the right framework to tackle these issues. So right now we're focused on AI bias, which was spoken a lot about today, information bubbles, screen time abuse, online harassment and abuse, and data and privacy issues. So we're really focused about everything moving forward and looking to connect with entrepreneurs and founders who are building the solutions to mitigate these issues.
Thank you, Carolina. Pedro, we haven't heard from anybody in Chile yet. Are you on? Can you give us a comment? Pedro Huichalaf? I do this to people. Hi, Pedro, welcome.
Thank you. Excuse me for my English.
Puedes hablar en español, Pedro.
Voy a hablar en español.
You can speak in Spanish, Pedro. Yes, I will speak in Spanish. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me and also for this forum in which I participated thanks to these conversations with Salesforce. I was attentively listening to the different perspectives about this issue of the industry. In my case, I participated from the government. I was Undersecretary of Communications, so I have more of a government perspective rather than from the private sector. And one thing that I was really paying attention is how with this issue with technology, with ethics, with artificial intelligence, and then metadata and cyber security, the need for the state to provide something, to provide guidelines and a public and private effort. Unfortunately, there are states that really take into consideration this issue, like the European Union, with a very important outlook regarding ethics and regulation. They have set up guidelines, use of AI in the US. Also, we made great progress, but we find other countries that perhaps have a different trend, and others, such as in Latin America, in which countries are really absent as far as states when it comes to definition. And that's where we fall into the trap of the self-regulation that companies implement in these markets, and that I do share the view that it's not possible to have a global outlook, a uniform outlook, only with self-regulation. But I have seen the interest from the industry to set some parameters, especially the large industry that is aware of the impact of including technologies for people in education, in training human capital, in training for filling this lack of vacancies that were being mentioned. The issue, the reality doesn't show that vis-a-vis these complex scenarios, for instance, in the case of the war between Russia and, in this case, the invasion of Russia, it has been proven how this war has included technological tools, other AI tools have been included that can have damaging effects on people. So that's the debate of saying, what should we do? Even the hackers have attacked Russia indiscriminately among civil citizens or military targets. So there is a logic of lack of ethics as a response of the cyber war, when this should be a military logic and not a civil logic. I don't know whether I'm making myself clear. To conclude, at least here in Chile, one of the countries that have made great progress in technology, we're developing the 5G, digital infrastructure. We want to be a reference point in the region as far as including technology. But one thing is to be a digital consumer, and another is for the state to make decisions. We have made progress. For instance, Chile was the first country to set the neutrality network law. Right now, a constitutional reform was proposed for your rights, which is one of the countries that set a constitutional reform. We are making progress in universities to develop artificial intelligence sector from the ethical and regulation point of view. But here, the best scenario is to have a political will and the work from organizations, and obviously always thinking that the end beneficiary is the human being. Thank you.
Escuchamos suficiente de los gobiernos, aunque Francisco.
We don't hear from governments. Francisco has shared a lot.
To comment after Ángel, so
yeah, I was doubting. Yeah, I was doubting if raising my hand is exactly because of that, because we are monopolizing.
No, but you have valuable comments, so we're happy to hear
and also Raúl said that I spoke a lot. So I will be hyper brief in this respect.
You're wasting your time. Sigue.
Highlighting how much I agree with Raúl. First, AI has all the potential to improve lives in our region. Credit, jobs, insurance, public policies, but its development has to be sustainable, politically and socially. No? Number two, I agree with him. We have to write the rules jointly. Private sector, public sector, civil society, and academia. And three, proactivity. This is where I think companies should pose these questions on data, algorithms, and things beforehand. And I take his point that governments also should, let's say, anticipate the unintended consequences of some regulations. Good news, the IDB job. I mean, the IDB is working with governments in social policies and with companies. And from UNESCO, we will be collaborating with them. But for the room, I agree 90% with Raúl.
Thank you, Ángel. And Rachel, I'm irreverent with Ángel. We've never met in person, but we've known each other very well for the last 2 years, only on a screen. So I feel as if I know you. Teresa, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Randy. And thank you everybody for this, such an interesting discussion. So I wanted to bring up a study that Salesforce commissioned last year for 2 reasons. One of them is the talk about inclusion, because it's a study regarding the conditions for women in STEM in Latin America. And then the other one is because of the collaboration among the private, public, and other sectors that the study is aimed at obtaining. So first of all, the study compares the situation for women in STEM in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. And it really threw some very interesting data that had really not been obtained before and was necessary in order to develop an accurate diagnosis of what the situation and the problem really is. And then the second step that leads to the collaboration that I was talking about is that based on the information that was gathered in the study, we have already begun to establish country coalitions, multi-stakeholder coalitions that are going to be implementing a very concrete policy roadmap that can be, it has aspects that can be implemented by the public sector, aspects that can be implemented by the private sector, and by other stakeholder groups. So we're really proud of this effort. And I know that some of the companies and organizations that are featured in this discussion here today are already members of these country coalitions. I see that my colleague Anna has already linked to the study. It would be great if everybody here gets a chance to take a look at it. It's great information. And then of course, if you do want to become members of these country coalitions, do not hesitate to reach out, because we really look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Teresa. That's fabulous work that you are doing. We do have time for some other comments. I don't see any hands, female or male. Julia Michaels, would you like to say a comment as an entrepreneur?
I was afraid you were going to call on me.
Well, see, we're well tuned in. Thank you. Welcome, Julia. Yes.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting. I'm here because I'm developing a platform, a digital platform based on what some people call the Black Atlantic. So this takes in the west coast of Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas. And
Wow.
we're trying to put together scholarship, individuals who are interested in their roots, museums, I could go on and on. And so we really want to build this platform with responsible tech. And so I'm just, I've been listening with great interest, and I have been reading this book that I put in the chat about deep tech, which talks about technology with soul. And I think it would be, I don't know if anybody else has read this book or knows Simon Robinson, who's in Sao Paulo. And this is technology that is purpose-driven, and that, right from the beginning thinks about the environment. So it's not like a side thing, it's the main thing. So I'd be interested to know what anybody thinks about all of that.
Any comments? And I was just told that your son worked with me many, many years ago when I first started at the council. So it's great to see the generation the other way around. And so we're drawing to the end of our program. Rachel, Raul, Marcelo, comment on the conversation we've had just now about inclusion and Julia's new venture. The floor is yours. Rachel, you go.
I forgot to say it's called Full Circle.
Yeah, Full Circle. Rachel, the floor is yours. I know you have a hard stop very soon.
No, just that sounds like an exciting platform, Julia. Look forward to seeing what that is, and glad to hear again about bringing the ethical questions, inclusivity questions at the very beginning. I think that's so important. So really encouraged to hear that, and really grateful again to be part of this broader conversation that's happening, and glad to see so many involved.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks to Salesforce for sponsoring this fabulous program. Raul, and then Marcelo, last comments.
I think that everybody agree in this meeting that the importance of diversity and inclusion. We have to work in the industry to make the industry more diverse and more inclusive, in order to provide solutions, technology solutions for everybody that reflect that diversity, that fit the needs of a broader set of people in the world. I agree very much with what you said, Randy, earlier today, when you said that that's the technology that is developed by men probably doesn't fit the needs of women, as an example. And the other thing is the inclusion as a result of using technology. And we have a lot of work to do there, and we have to work together, all the stakeholders, in making the technology a tool for having more inclusion in the economy, and that technology can be used for helping advancing social and human development in the region without distinction between people. A lot of work to do, but I think that there is a huge agreement here. What is very good. It's a basis for future development and talks. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Marcelo.
Randy, so technologies, that's what they've been called when they don't achieve diversity and inclusion, and they don't level the playing field. So we need to think hard about so technologies. Artificial intelligence can become a so technology for Latin America and the Caribbean, and any other technology if we don't do the right things. To Julia, I think that congratulations for that idea, and I think that exemplifies what we're trying to do at the IDB Lab, which is trying to help entrepreneurs at the very early stage that are going to be working with technology to adopt that at a relatively low cost, in an ethical and responsible way. I think that we're going to have big tech companies in the future that are going to be even more ethical and responsible if they start off with that kind of conversation. And last but not least, I want to say this, self-regulation doesn't work. I'm an economist as well, and I know that regulation is needed. And so, we don't need to be naive. We understand that technologies can be used for good and for bad, and the work of the government is super important. The important thing now for governments in Latin America and for private companies is to learn from each other and to trust each other. And I don't want to be naive. That's not easy, But I think that it needs to be done because otherwise, I insist on that, we have no other way to solve the problem that we are in. Thank you.
And so dialogue is super important because there's so many people who need to be brought into the digital age. We need to fast forward to understand artificial intelligence because, as we know, artificial intelligence can be bad, but it can also be good. These amazing medicines are being created using artificial intelligence, but we need trust and we need dialogue because there are a lot of uninformed Congresses out there creating regulations. They're replicating what the OECD is doing. They're really not doing the right thing, and there's a lot of misinformation. So I think we have lots and lots to talk about and to continue this conversation. But Rachel, you have been fabulous. Raul, so informative. And Marcelo, can I tell people that you're with us despite having COVID? So Marcelo's been a real trooper.
Yes.
And thank you all for participating today. We're doing something very unusual, which is that we're ending early. And so thanks again to Salesforce for sponsoring this fabulous program. I have learned an awful lot. I hope you all too. And we look forward to staying in touch and collaborating. Mil gracias, obrigada, and thank you very, very, very much.
Gracias, Randy.
Thank you very much.